All right, my selection for community news highlight this week is what one rule or mechanic always gets argued at your table. We had a lot of really great feedback from the community, as always, and I've picked a few that were fairly popular amongst our fellow Dungeons and Dragoneers. So, number one that seems to get argued a lot is Tack of Opportunity. Now, the rules state this is fairly simple. If you are within melee range of an opponent and you move out of reach of that opponent, then that opponent, provided they have a reaction available to them, can use that reaction to make an attack of opportunity. Now, this is just a single weapon attack with all proficiencies and modifiers present. That represents the distraction that might be caused when you, as a target, disengage from combat without using the disengage option and just break away and try to flee. So it presumes that when you do so, you drop your guard and you try to make your way away from an enemy or creature, and as a result, that creature gets one attack of opportunity on you. It's relatively simple and it seems pretty straightforward. In my experience, where it does get a little bit dicey is if there are questions as to what type of attack that can be, or whether or not attacks that give you extended reach like polearms play into that. Now, other things that tend to make this a little bit dicey are whether or not something is still within your reach, like if you're using a polearm, or whether extraneous forces push you out of reach of an opponent. So the rules state that an opportunity attack is available to you when a hostile creature moves out of your reach, which allows you to make one melee attack using your reaction against that opponent. So let's break that down. If you are using a weapon that has a 5-foot reach and somebody moves out of your reach, the opportunity attack happens the moment just before they exit your reasonable reach. So if you're using a polearm that has the reach effect, then your reach is effectively 10 feet and you wouldn't be able to capitalize on an opportunity attack until they were about to extend past 10 feet away from you, or 2 blocks on a grid. Now, other things that come into play that tend to make this dicey are let's say, for example, turn undead. If you turn undead and you force an undead creature to run out of reach of one of your companions, does that companion get an opportunity attack? An opportunity attack comes into play whenever a creature uses either their own action, reaction, or movement to extend out of that reach. If you use something like turn undead and you fear effectively an undead creature out of reach, then that undead creature uses their movement to leave. So the attacking party member or PC would actually be able to make an opportunity attack. It's unwise though, because when you do, you can break the turn undead and it gets a little bit dicey. Now, when things are out of that scope and cause a creature to leave your reach, like let's say they are blown away by a thunder wave or they fall off a cliff, then those things don't use either movement or reaction. They're, let's call them extraneous forces that pull the creature out of reach. So an opportunity attack would not apply in that case. So it does get a little bit dicey, but think about it this way. Basically, if a creature uses its movement, action, or reaction to exit reach, then at the very moment where they exit reach, the opposing attacker has the opportunity to make an attack of opportunity using one melee attack on their reaction. So a couple of things have to be in play. They have to have a melee weapon or a melee attack available. They have to have their reaction available and have not used it thus far in combat. And the force that causes the target to move out of reach cannot be extraneous, let's say, or anything that doesn't use movement, action, or reaction. And that's a recap on opportunity attack. I guess it is a little bit more confusing when you think about it. Other ones that were popular fodder for argument at the table were tracking what players do and say or do not do and say. To this end, I just encourage everyone to take notes at the table. We have the benefit of using a podcast, so we record it week to week, so we actually have an audio log of what was said or not said, and it usually kind of helps us keep track of things. When in doubt, though, just rule in the moment. I mean, it doesn't really serve anyone if you're really kind of splitting hairs on what was said or not said. Make a ruling that you feel is fair and move on with it. Let's not get hung up on it. It's not really fun for anybody. But otherwise, keeping notes and even an audio log, even if you're not recording for a podcast, just having like an iPhone or let's say a smartphone, not sponsored by Apple, in the middle of the table, just recording the session lets you kind of go back over it and remember things, because things do get forgotten in the moment and it's an exciting game, right? Moving on, sneak attack and when and how to add sneak attack tends to be a little bit of a sticking point for a lot of people. Sneak attack, I feel, is kind of a misnomer, honestly. It tends to make people think sneaky, stealth, quiet, surprise, but it really doesn't work that way at all. Sneak attack is more an opportunity to observe a moment of weakness or a moment to attack another character or creature when they are exposed or vulnerable. Realistically, you can get sneak attack damage whenever you have advantage on an attack roll, which could include DM inspiration. It could include being helped or aided by another character, or it could involve coming out of stealth as an assassin. The other time when sneak attack damage applies is if there is a friendly creature within 5 feet of that creature. So if you think about a grid, if there is in the 3x3 block around your 1 block where the creature lives, if there is another ally also jockeying in melee combat with that target, then you would always get sneak attack damage. Furthermore, sneak attack damage applies once per turn, but it doesn't stipulate that it has to be per your turn. And this has been clarified by Jeremy Crawford in the Sage Advice column, as well as a number of tweets replying to exactly this question. So what that means is, as a rogue during your turn, sneak attack damage can apply on an attack that you make given the general rules. But additionally, if you as a rogue get another attack on someone else's turn, for example, an opportunity attack, which happens on the imposing creature's turn, you would also earn sneak attack damage. Another one that came up pretty frequently was Uncanny Dodge. Rogues seem to be heavily contested in this area of things. So Uncanny Dodge, first of all, expends your reaction. You must be able to see the attacker in order to use it. It only works on one attack that's being made on the rogue. And it does work against all types of attacks, including spell attacks, except where the damage requires a saving throw. So what that means is something like Firebolt or Mage Blade or Green Flame Blade. Those you could use your Uncanny Dodge on to reduce the damage by half. However, something like a Fireball or any other kind of area effect that requires a saving throw to determine how damage is calculated would not be subject to Uncanny Dodge if it was available. So that's really the simple rules as written, and the rules do stipulate that it happens when the attack hits you, which would suggest that it's before damage is calculated. But a lot of GMs house rule around that, so be sure to check in with your local. For me, one that I find that comes up quite frequently is the element of stealth and surprise and how they work. So you have stealth when characters are trying to be quiet and sneak up or get an advantage on some enemies. And then, of course, the effect of surprise itself and how it plays out in the combat round. So the number one thing that you have to do to establish whether something is stealthy and effective in creating surprise is to declare that you are being stealthy. Now, this might sound pretty simple, it might sound pretty rudimentary, but a lot of times it's surprising how frequently, players will say, "Oh, we were trying to be sneaky," but they didn't really mention it before, or they'd say that they're trying to be sneaky and then they get disappointed because combat just kind of rolls in as normal. So number one, up to the players, state that you're trying to be stealthy and you're going to try to surprise these targets. That's the first step. Declare what you're doing. Number two, of course, is the attempt to sneak, which is a stealth roll. Now, I'll either do this if a couple of characters are going up, splitting off from the group to create their own surprise scenario, then each of them would roll a stealth check. Or if the party is trying to be stealthy together and orchestrate a surprise attack, then it would be a group stealth check, and we take the average of all checks in that roll. Then, of course, the result of that stealth check is checked against either the passive perception or the active perception of the creatures they're attempting to get the jump on. You essentially organize what creatures are surprised and which ones aren't. It is possible in a group of more than one creature that some of them might be surprised and some of them might not. Don't think of it as a surprise round. Surprise is more of like an effect or a condition. So once you've determined that the players are stealthy and whether they were successful or not against how many of the creatures were surprised or not, then you go into the first round of combat. Think about this act of surprise applying a surprised state to creatures who fail on their checks. Just like any other combat round, you go right to the top of combat initiative and work your way down from there. Any creature who is surprised, or let's say is holding the surprised state, does not get to make an action or use their movement. Furthermore, they can't use a bonus action as part of the action economy, and they cannot use a reaction until after their first turn. So wherever the players come in who are doing the surprising, they get to go through their turns normally until you either hit a creature or enemy that was not surprised, or one of the surprised creatures gets to use their reaction after their turn has gone by. Declare surprise. Determine who's surprised and who is not, and then roll through initiative as normal. Creatures who are surprised do not get an action, bonus action, or movement. Creatures who are surprised can only use their reaction after their turn has gone by.